marketing. So this is what I always hear people just hate the most. And how do you go about that? And then what would be some tips that you might have, like maybe 2 or 3 tips for people about like how to get started anyways?
You know what's really funny is somebody was actually just talking to me about this on Discord, so I'm ready for you.
Perfect.
In this example, basically when this person spoke to me, they're like, do you have any tips for marketing a product? And so I was like, what's your product? Right? It's like, it's a book. It's like, what kind of book? Like, what is it? Right? And then I was like, okay, who's your intended audience for the book? And it's like, that's a good question. I was like, yes, it is. Right.
Yeah.
And so I basically started asking more questions about who the target audience was. And that's really important. So you want to identify not just one person that you want to read your book, because you're going to have your intended reader and then you're going to have 2 other people, right? An example of my intended reader depends on what I'm writing, but usually my first intended reader is my husband, right? And that's a really hard intended reader because he really doesn't like to read, right?
Mm.
So when I write something, I'm writing for a hard to reach audience in hopes that he'll look at it, right? But then I've got my 2 backups. So, but you want to know what kind of books they read, where they hang out at, what other things do they do, like what are they interested in, right? Mm-hmm. And then you want to ask yourself, like, my favorite questions, what about your book makes it better than a latte, right? So if somebody has to make a choice between buying a latte from Starbucks or buying your book, what is it about your book that's going to promise that it's better? As in, how does it not suck, right?
Yeah.
And so that comes from Seven Figure Fiction by T. Taylor. Now, she usually talks more about buttering up stories. If you're into that, it's actually a really good book. I like it a lot as far as storycraft goes. But that's always a good question. Like, if you have $7, right, where are you going to spend it at, and why is your thing better?
Yeah. So. Yeah, I really love that. That's awesome. I've never really heard it said like that, but I really like that. I'm similar. My wife, she loves sci-fi fantasy, like she'll watch movies and stuff, but she's not really she doesn't really like reading a book or anything like that. Mm-hmm. She likes reading self-help or nonfiction stuff, but like she's just not one to sit down and read a big fantasy book or something. So I always am like, if something I write, if I can get her to really like it, then
it's a win.
It's a win. Yeah. That's fun. So how long now have you been? You talked about you wrote something in the pandemic. So when did you publish your first thing?
2019.
2019. So it's been, what is that? 6 years, 4 or 5 years now? Yeah. That's awesome. How do you have a process for like, beta readers? You mentioned that you do editing as well. So like, do you have an editor that does your stuff separate from you? Yeah,
I do. So I try not to bother my editor until I actually have like a fully completed manuscript. But one thing I'm going to tell you, and this might cause some controversy, I make sure that my editor is currently available on Fiverr. And the reason I do that is because sometimes an editor has life happen, right? And I understand that life happens, but I also understand that I paid you, right? And so if for some reason my editor ghosts me, which has happened before to me in the past, I can at least talk to Fiverr and be kind of like, hey, non-responsive, can I get my stuff back, right? So that's one thing that I do. And I know, like I said, that's probably going to upset some people, but unfortunately, on the writing and the editing and even on art side, that happens with a big frequency. So I always need some kind of fallback on that.
Yeah.
But once I know that my author or my editor is available, I send them the manuscript, and I don't really have an established timeline after that because life happens. And so sometimes if an editor's like, yeah, I'll get your book done in a month, I would probably tack on like 2 more months just to be safe. Mm-hmm. And then usually around that time frame, I'll get it back.
Yeah.
So, yeah.
Yeah. That's always, it's one of those unfortunate things where it's like, you want to have faith in people, but you also got to protect yourself too. It's just kind of the unfortunate necessity of being in the creative fields.
Yeah. But before it goes to the editor, if the intended reader is my husband, then I'll send it to him and I'll be like, what do you like? What do you not like? Right. And he's pretty savage. He'll be kind of like, this is boring. I wouldn't read it. And I'll be like, okay, I'll just edit it quietly now.
Yeah.
Yeah. And then I've got 2 critique partners. And if they're not like bogged down with stuff, they'll be like, can you like look at 5 pages and tell me if this is shit or not? And they'll tell me. So.
Yeah. Yeah. I have 4 brothers, and we're all big fantasy, sci-fi, like all that kind of stuff. And I remember saying in a video once that I was going to have them be my first round of beta readers. and someone commented like, well, having your family be, that's kind of cheating. Like, what if they aren't, tell you the truth or whatever? And I was like, no. They will be savage. Like they don't care about my feelings at all.
Good. Those are the good ones to have.
Yeah. And they want it to be good, and they also are very honest with their opinions. So good to have those people.
Yeah, I'm kind of jealous, but I get it.